manner.
And it looks like an Abzan
and it looks like Zach
mid-range
is
deck.
on Abzan Control, which we haven't seen a whole lot of. So I'm excited to see just how this is going to play out. So it looks like Zach is on the play. He's going to lead off with an Evolving Wilds and pass the turn.
Yeah, and this should be pretty exciting. I think that the, you can assess it as most aggro versus control decks, but the Blue-White Spirits decks, it has a lot of good tricks. It has flash threats. It's going to be able to pull some shenanigans, attack in the air, and Zachary is playing cards like Sylvan Advocate to try to clog up the board, but he's really going to need to lean on his removal. In particular, Languish is a card that can pull a ton of weight, and he's probably going to hope that he just draws more Languish than he does Gideon, because Gideon is a card that can sometimes get easily attacked by the Flying Spirits.
Well, Robert is going to start out with a Port Town, revealing a basic and a Mausoleum Wanderer. Zachary's going to get a Forest on his end step with that Evolving Wilds. And at the start of his second turn, we're just going to see an Oath of Nissa, and he's taking his time to decide what creature, land, or planeswalker he wants off of it. He will take a Hissing Quagmire. Let's see what he plays for the turn.
Yeah, and one thing to note about Zachary's deck is it is pretty planeswalker heavy, so he doesn't have that many removal spells. The removal spells he does have are quite good, and a lot of his planeswalkers come in the form of removal spells. Sorin, Ob Nixilis, and Liliana are all essentially removal spells that leave a planeswalker behind.
Liliana in particular is extremely good against the Spirits deck.
Yep.
So on Robert's second turn, he's going to play a Selfless Spirit that's going to pump his Mausoleum Wanderer and attack in for 2. Let's see what Zachary decides to do.
And a
on his
Liliana
third turn.
here would be phenomenal.
All right, looks like he does just have an Evolving Wilds and a pass.
And that might be an issue. If Zachary had a land that could play untapped here, if he was 2 colors, there'd be a greater chance of that happening. But a Liliana getting deployed there would be really great for Zachary. As it stands, Robert might be able to generate enough pressure to overpower a Liliana, or even just counter it when it comes down with a Spell Queller.
And so Robert does have another land and a Mausoleum Wanderer. It's going to pump his current Mausoleum Wanderer, and that's going to allow him to attack Zachary for 4.
Yeah, and Zachary's pretty far behind. He hasn't really cast any meaningful spells this game. Robert has 3 threats out with 2 mana open, so he could be representing a counter spell or another flash threat like Rattle Chains. Zachary's big way to catch up in this scenario is to cast Languish, but those Mausoleum Wanderers can just counter them.
Zach is going to find another black source on Robert's end step with that Evolving Wilds, a Caves of Kolios for the turn, and he's just going to pass back to Robert. He really needs to try and find some way to engineer a Languish here. Rattle Chains is going to come down on Zachary's end step. A Grasp of Darkness is going to take care of one of the Mausoleum Wanderers. Rattle Chains will resolve.
And so I think, it would have also been interesting for Robert to consider just casting Rattle Chains on his turn, just so that he could have gotten in for an extra 2 points of damage. That said, Robert is probably going to be in an okay situation here, so long as he has, just a little bit more pressure.
All right, well, here is a Bygone Bishop, and this could be
I think that's actually an Always Watching.
Oh, and Always Watching.
And this is great, because this is going to allow Robert to deploy a lot more power and toughness on the board that has haste, hit Zachary for a bunch, and this is going to make it so that that single Mausoleum Guard can potentially counter a Languish just by itself, because it's going to be a 2/2.
So Zachary is going to fall down to 6 on the attack, and we might even just see a game over here before he casts a relevant spell.
Yeah, there's almost nothing Zachary can really do here that's particularly meaningful.
All right, Ruinous Path is going to be the cast for Zachary. Targeting Selfless Spirit, Robert is going to sacrifice it in response to give the rest of his creatures indestructible. He's going to crack that Evolving Wilds on Zachary's end step and get another island.
And Robert just needs to deploy 1 more Spirit to pump his Mausoleum Wanderer, and he's going to be able to attack for the win. I think the story of this game was simply that Zach didn't cast very many spells. You see Mausoleum Wanderer, and you kind of want to slow roll your removal spells to try to play around it. But this Blue-White Spirits deck isn't going to give you infinite time, and you kind of need to start firing stuff off while you can.
He doesn't even need a spirit. He could just play another Always Watching.
Yeah, that too.
And that's what he has. And Robert Gross is going to take that first game with Blue-White Spirits against Zachary Canner on Abzan Control. Let's go ahead and take a look at our player sideboard so we can see how we think they're going to change things up. From Robert's side, we have 2 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, 1 Secure the Waste, 1 Selfless Spirit, 2 Blessed Alliance, 2 Negate, 2 Summary Dismissal, 2 Tragic Arrogance, 2 Stasis Snare, and 1 copy of Ojutai's Command. How do we think Robert's going to sideboard here?
So I think he's got a couple good cards to fight control decks. I think Gideon is going to be a nice one, as is Secure the Waste. Selfless Spirit doesn't do a whole lot of work because it doesn't line up well against Languish or against Grasp of Darkness. He may bring it in if he just wants a little bit more redundancy in his 2-drop slot. Negate can be a nice way to fight the Abzan removal, and as well as Planeswalkers. Blessed Alliance, do you remember what that does? Is that the one that...
Yes, the Escalate card.
It is the Escalate
so you can
card.
Untap up to 2.
Yeah. So I think
make them
Zachary...
sack a creature against
Yeah,
life.
I think Zachary will board in his Blessed Alliance, but I don't think Robert Gross will, because Robert is clearly on the offensive.
So on Zachary's side, we have 2 Blessed Alliance, 1 Ishkana Graph Widow, 2 Declaration Stone, 3 Deadweight, 3 Transgress the Mind, a copy of Anguished Unmaking, 1 Tragic Arrogance, 1 Seasons Past, and 1 Dragonlord Jamoka. How do you think Zachary is going to sideboard?
So Zachary has a lot of great anti-aggro elements in his sideboard. I think he's going to bring all of the following: 2 Blessed Alliance, 1 Ishkana, 3 Deadweight, 1 Tragic Arrogance, 1 Dragonlord Jamoka. Those are going to come in for sure. And then if he thinks he needs additional removal above and beyond that, he can also consider the 2 Declaration of Stones. It seems like he has more than enough options for removal, and Declaration of Stone, giving your opponent a clue is a little less desirable. That said, if Robert is able to counter a bunch of stuff with Spell Quellers, 1 Declaration of Stone can knock them all out. So, for those reasons, he may or may not play the Declaration of Stone. The other ones for sure, though.
I actually think that I like Declaration of Stone here. If I was in Zachary's seat, I definitely would bring them in.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who are watching, if there are any matchups that you saw, caught glimpses of, or you want to go back and watch, maybe you're interested in this Blue-White Spirits deck, all of the archives for this will be on our YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out. youtube.com/StarCityGames. Versus Series, Premium Archives, SCG Tour Archives, unboxings, some of which are done by yours truly, and much more. Absolutely free to subscribe, and you'll be notified when new videos get posted. And that happens multiple times a week. youtube.com/StarCityGames. So going into this sideboarded match, it felt like on the play, Robert was a pretty big favorite if he was able to tempo out Zachary, which he did successfully. Now we get into the post-board matches, post-board games. Zachary's on the play. I have to feel like he's going to be a favorite here with all the additional removal that he gains.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. Zachary might have actually been on the play in Game 1.
Oh, he was on the play.
Wow, I think so.
That's even worse.
Yeah, I might be remembering that incorrectly. But the main problem with that game was just Zachary didn't cast very many spells. But in the post board, he has access to more cheap removal and some ways of catching up if he falls behind. Those 5 mana spells like Tragic Arrogance and Ishkana are great against the Blue-White Spirits deck. And Dragonlord Jamoka is something that the Blue-White Spirits deck just has no way of dealing with. Robert Gross does have access to a few Declaration of Stones. He did have 2 Stasis Snares in his sideboard. I don't think he's going to be bringing them in because I think he wants to just keep his deck mostly aggressive, and the slots that he has available for spells, I think he'd just rather have things like Negate. But Dragonlord Jamoka is also something that, it's just this huge body that's going to be very difficult for the Blue-White Spirits deck to deal with.
Yeah, Dragonlord Jamoka is a pretty big game here.
Yeah. It's not very good against Reflector Mage, but it's certainly good against this Blue-White deck.
All right, so it looks like Zachary is going to send his hand back. Not happy with the starting 7. He's going to see if he can get a better 6. Robert's going to check his hand out.
And both of these players are looking for kind of fast starts because this is a tempo-orientated matchup. Zachary wants to see a lot of cheap removal in his hand. Robert wants to see a lot of cheap threats in his hand. That said, if you do believe that that's all the mulligans come down to, Robert has much better chance of not mulliganing. His deck is only 2 colors, and he has much greater threat density at the bottom of his curve. Zachary, because he's trying to go much higher up the curve, and he's 3 colors, he's going to be mulliganing a lot more to try to get a fast hand.
All right, Robert will keep his 7. Zachary is happy with the 6. The Scry is going to stay on top. Let's go ahead and jump into game 2. Robert Gross on Blue-White Spirits versus Zachary Canner on Abzan Control. Zachary will start off with a Hissing Quagmire and pass the turn to Robert. See if Robert has a Mausoleum Wanderer. He does not. He's just going to play a Port Town tapped and pass the turn back. Zachary has another creature land, Shambling Vent, and passing to Robert. Robert has a Plains and no turn 2 play.
Well, not yet. He might have a Rattle Chains. I can't imagine him keeping a 7-card hand that doesn't have at least a 2-drop.
Well, Zachary has another tapped land and a face-up Den Protector to get the beatdown going. Robert's going to play a Rattle Chains on Zachary's end step. And now all of his spirits have flash, so we're going to see a lot of pass, play things on your end step.
Yep. And I like the face-up Den Protector. This is going to give Zachary at least a little bit of an ability to race back against Robert, and is going to make it so that Robert can't just take as much time as he wants to pick the perfect spot for deploying his flash threats while also having counter magic open.
All right, well, Zachary is just going to attack for 2 and pass the turn with an Evolving Wilds. Robert has nothing on Zachary's end step. He's going to crack back with Rattle Chains, bringing Zachary down to 16. And passing the turn yet again. Zachary's going to sacrifice the Evolving Wilds, go get a Plains. Let's see if he has some kind of action on his turn 5. Zachary will draw a card. 5-mana spells are very powerful against these Blue-White Spirit decks since they can't be tagged by Spell Queller, but the majority of Roberts are either Planeswalkers or removal spells. It seems instead he's just going to fire up Hissing Quag or Shambling Vent and get into the red zone.
Yeah, so Zachary's doing as much as he can to play around the counter magic that Robert potentially has.
And here is a Bygone Bishop for Robert, and he's going to be able to block it. Looks like he's just going to block the Shambling Vent, and then he's going to Essence Flux the Bygone Bishop, which will make it a 3/4, but it's still not going to kill the Shambling Vent.
Yeah, I would have liked to have seen him Essence Flux before blocks, but the nice thing about doing it this way is it just prevents Zachary from gaining the life. So he may just value that 3 life more than the Shambling Vent.
So Den Protector will get in for 2 points of damage and drop Robert down to 16. Looks like Robert has a fistful of land. So that Bygone Bishop is really nice. It's going to turn all of the additional creatures that Robert can play into clues.
Yeah, and this is the one good source of card advantage for this Blue-White Spirits deck. It looks like Robert also has a checklist card, which I believe is Archangel Avacyn. So Robert's got a lot of good game here, depending on what Zachary does.
He is just going to attack for 5, knock Zachary down to 11, pass the turn back with a whole bunch of mana available. Let's see what Zachary can piece together here. Shambling Vent's going to fire up.
And this might be pretty bad. Robert could potentially play Avacyn, block with it, and then crack back for 9.
All right, well, Shambling Vent and Den Protector are going to enter the red zone. Here comes that Archangel Avacyn. We're going to see a block. And a counterattack is going to be pretty devastating.
Yeah, a counterattack is going to be able to knock Zachary down to 4 after the 2 life are gained. And Robert's just in a phenomenal position.
All right, Avacyn will block the Shambling Vent. It's going to drop Robert down to 14. Zachary's going to go up to 13. And this combat step does not look like it's going to be very good for Zachary.
And if we look at this game, all Zachary has really done is play a face-up Den Protector. He's activated Shambling Vent a few times, but he hasn't deployed anything. I think that he gave too much respect to the open mana that Robert was representing, and he just has to cast his cards.
Robert is going to attack here for 9. Zachary's going to take it all and fall down to 4. He'll untap and draw a card. He does have Languish, but that isn't going to do a whole lot. If Robert happens to have a Spell Queller. There is a Languish.
And he's got 2 mana available.
Well, Robert is going to allow the Languish to resolve and then pass the turn.
We'll see what happens here. Looks like Robert just didn't really have anything.
He's just going to play a Selfless Spirit and pass the turn back. So that has to be a sigh of relief for Zachary.
Yeah, I was worried that he was in a near fatal position, but it looks like his patience has kind of paid off for him.
Seems that he's picked up a copy of Ishkana, which is real nice. Who in Blessed Alliance. So this is going to be escalated once. So he's going to be able to choose 2 modes. And my guess is going to make Robert sacrifice an attacking creature and gain 4 life.
Yeah, and going from 4 to 8 is a big deal. This blue-white Spirits deck, it doesn't hit particularly hard.
And there's a Spell Queller that's going to take care of the Blessed Alliance. So Zachary's going to fall down to 2 on the attack. I wonder if Robert had that Spell Queller when the Languish was cast.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, it sounds like he had 3 white sources available and no blue mana to be able to stop that Spell Queller, or to Spell Queller the Blessed Alliance. So Languish is going to take care of Robert's board and get that Blessed Alliance, which will allow Zachary to gain 4 life.
Yeah, now Robert's in rough shape. He still has an Avacyn. He might be able to steal this game. Ishkan is going to potentially have something to say about that.
And if we have Delirium, this is going to be extremely nice.
Yeah. And this is where it's really nice to have a card like Ojutai's Command.
Instant creature, land, and sorcery. Looks like he does have Delirium.
And one of the big reasons that people play this card, Ishkana, it does a great job of stabilizing the board, but it specifically does a great job of stabilizing against blue-white Spirits. And at the beginning of this format, we're in the first couple of weeks of it. I know that everyone is worried about this Spirits deck. I know I played News Constrictor, specifically because I just wanted access to a reach creature.
All right, well, here we have a Rattle Chains and an Archangel Avacyn for Robert on Zachary's end step. Let's see what he can put together. Ooh, here is a Declaration in Stone. That's going to take care of the Ishkana.
And this means that the Avacyn can start attacking, which is quite nice.
Avacyn and Rattle Chains are both going to attack.
And what's great about the attack with the Rattle Chains is if Zachary blocks the Rattle Chains would trade. And that would flip the Avacyn, knocking Zachary down to 1 and killing the other Spider token. So really great attack from Robert.
All right, so Zachary's going to crack a clue on Robert's end step. He did take 4 damage on that last attack. He's fallen down to 4. Let's see if he can find an answer to Archangel Avacyn.
And if he can just start to stabilize, his Shambling Vent's going to dig him out of a life deficit. So
oh, looks like he does have a Tragic Arrogance. That will get rid of the Archangel Avacyn.
yeah, Tragic Arrogance is just so good, especially against these Spirits decks, because they look to clog up or deploy a lot of threats, and they have Selfless Spirit, Archangel Avacyn to try to protect them, Spell Queller to counter things that would kill them. Tragic Arrogance, though, says sacrifice, takes care of indestructible creatures, and it's 5 mana.
Oh, Hissing Quagmire is going to get fired up and put into the red zone. That will knock Robert down to 12. He will sacrifice an Evolving Wilds on Zachary's end step and find another basic land. Something like Always Watching would be very good here.
Yeah, that would be. He definitely wants something to make it so that he can attack without having to trade away his Rattle Chains.
He's just going to pass the turn. And here we have Shambling Vents might start digging Zachary out of this hole.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kalidas is a big draw. Here's a Clash of Wills for 1 billion. Kalidas will be countered.
And I think this is where you just fire up the Shambling Vent.
Yep, he's going to fire up the Shambling Vent. He will take 1 point of damage to do so.
Still
but
worth
he's
it.
going to attack for 2, knock Robert down to 10, go back up to 5, and then play another Shambling Vent.
And that other Shambling Vent's a big deal. He's going to have to take 2 damage, I believe, if he wants to fire up both. But that is probably worth it.
Right, Robert will just draw for his turn and then pass. And here's a 4-mana spell. Oh, another Kalidas right off the top.
And these lifelinkers are going to do so much to just lock Robert out of the game. Robert doesn't really have access to any good way to catch up when he falls behind, and his deck doesn't actually do anything that powerful. I was talking about how one of the advantages Robert has was that his deck was so low to the ground and had so many cheap spells. It was only 2 colors, and that made it so that its mulligan decisions were a lot easier in the sense that he would be able to keep a greater number of his hands. Zachary's really getting paid off with the late game cards, the access to the creature lands for being 3 colors, and just barely stabilized in that game to take it.
Well, Zachary is going to take game 2 here on Abzan Control against Blue-White Spirits. Let's take a look back at the player sideboards to see if we think that there are going to be any changes that might be made to the players' game plans.
So I don't think they will make any big changes. I do think that Robert will take a stronger look at his counter magic. The counter magic is generally better when he's on the play. That said, I don't think that the actual card choices are going to change that much between play and draw. I think the value of those cards changes a little bit, but not so much that you would actually change your deck configuration.
I agree. I agree with all of that. So now while our players are finishing up, making sure that their sideboards are correct and shuffling up for the next game, let's take a quick second and talk about the Kaladesh pre-release that's going to be coming up at the end of September. So September 24th and 25th, you can get your hands on this exclusive Bengali Rye playmat, limited edition, available at participating stores. So if you're in Roanoke at the StarCityGames.com Game Center, you can get it there. But if you would like to have this playmat there in your store, make sure you talk to your LGS and let them know, hey, I want this Bengali Rye playmat for Kaladesh pre-release. Go check it out. Go to StarCityGames.com/pre-release, or they can contact us at ISP at StarCityGames.com. Again, this will be exclusive and only available during that Kaladesh pre-release.
You know, one thing that seems to be a recurring theme, and part of it is because of just simply the card pool that we have access to, but one thing that has been becoming more and more noticeable to me is that so many of these black-white, whether they're Abzan or straight black-white or what have you, these bigger endgame decks, one of the things that makes them so successful is not only do they have a lot of card advantage, they also have a lot of ways to gain life. And in previous seasons, we've seen decks like Esper Control, where they have a lot of really good control elements and some good sources of card advantage, and they've been a little lacking on the life gain. With these control decks, I would say that their control elements aren't quite as good as some of the previous season's control decks, but they make up for it by having all these lifelink creatures, because it's almost like when you play against these control decks, they're starting with 30 life, because they end up having all of these different ways to gain life, whether it's Shambling Vent and Kalidas, or now we see Blessed Alliance. Zachary also has access to Dragon Lord Dramoka. In Rudy's deck, we've seen that he's playing Gisela. Even the green-white tokens deck, it has access to Ormondal. And it seems like, with decks able to switch which axis they play, whether they want to fight a card advantage battle, a tempo battle, or a life total battle, you need to be able to operate on all those axes also. And if you don't have a good source of life gain, that can prove to be a weakness when you try to play a long game against basically any deck.
Yeah, just being able to utilize all of the different resources available to you, especially cards that allow you to trade one resource for another. So we find with a lot of the mid-range or control style decks, they're giving up the early game, they're giving up some of the tempo so that they're able to catch back up in the mid to late game when they can play very powerful spells, use these 2-for-1 spells, playing 2 spells in 1 turn, and then lean on cards like Shambling Vent or Sorin or things of that nature to regain the life that they've lost, utilizing that as a resource in the early games.
Yeah. Another thing, too, is generally speaking, when I'm looking at a control deck, the way that I want to catch up is with a card like Languish or Day of Judgment or Tragic Arrogance. Those are the things that I like. I don't like trying to rely on a card like Gisela or Kalidas to catch up, because even though they have lifelink, they're just one body that can easily die to a removal spell. But so many of the aggro decks in this format just don't actually have very many removal spells. And if they do, they're in the form of Dramoka's Command, which makes them fight, meaning even if your creature dies, at least you'll get some of the life gain out of it.
All right, here we go into Game 3 between Robert Gross and Zachary Canner. Robert is going to mulligan to 6 and keep his opener. He has 2 lands here. And Zachary's going to play a Sylvan Advocate. And remember, my friend, lands in front, or no lands in front.
And seems like Robert didn't have Rattle Chains at the end of the turn. He's going into his turn 3, and hopefully will deploy his first threat soon. But this is kind of a tough spot. This is not where the blue-white Spirits player wants to be.
All right, so Robert does not have a play on his turn 3 outside of playing a basic land. Zachary's going to attack for 2 with his Sylvan Advocate, play an Evolving Wilds, and just play another Sylvan Advocate. That's going to get snagged by a Spell Queller, so that is a body that can bounce off of the opposing Sylvan Advocate or just start attacking in the air. Yeah,
and this is the tempo play that Robert really needed. He was able to neutralize Zachary's play and deploy his own, so truly just what the doctor ordered.
Robert's going to attack for 2 with that Spell Queller, knock Zachary down to 18, play an Evolving Wilds of his own, and sacrifice it while Zachary uses his own Evolving Wilds. You can try and take the fetches out of Standard, but they're still going to be there.
Yeah. I mean, I won't play that card. No way. Huh? Evolving Wild? PU. Card smells bad.
It is everywhere, though. Tell you what.
Yeah, whenever my opponents play it, I'm like, LOL, I win. Turn 1 kill. My opponent played Evolving Wilds.
All right, Zachary's going into his 4th turn here. Sylvan Advocate's going to enter the red zone, knock Robert down to 16. There's a Dragonlord Dramoka in his hand.
Yeah,
I want to
that's
see
a
that.
Sweet one.
See that bad boy hit the battlefield. Declaration Stone for Zachary is going to target Spell Queller. This will get back another Sylvan Advocate.
Yeah, and things don't seem to be lining up particularly well for Robert. He mulliganed, which obviously is bad for him, but this is one of the tricky things about these tempo control decks like Delver and Legacy, or now Blue-White Spirits and Standard, is that if things don't line up the way that you plan on them lining up, your cards can end up being quite ineffective.
Declaration in Stone is going to take out that Spell Queller, give Robert Gross a Max McFeety clue token, and unlock the Sylvan Advocate that's hiding underneath it. A Sylvan Advocate, or a Spell Queller, is going to snag that Sylvan Advocate, though, when it goes back on the stack. Zachary's going to play an Evolving Wilds and pass the turn back to Robert. So I actually kind of like that. Letting the Declaration in Stone resolve, getting a clue, and then just re-snagging the Sylvan Advocate with another Spell Queller.
It's nice in terms of getting a little bit of value. I think what Robert really wants, though, is just pressure. I think I would have liked to have just counter it with the other Queller, just so that Robert would be able to have 4 power worth of attackers. It is probably in Robert's best interest to just end this game as quickly as possible. Zachary is the one that wants there to be more trading of resources, the game to drag out longer.
Robert is just going to pass the turn with 4 mana available. Zachary will sacrifice his Evolving Wilds on Robert's end step and get a Swamp. Let's see what he's going to do going into his turn 5 here. We do have that Dragonlord Dramoka, and it can come down next turn if he can find an untapped land. He'll just play his 5th land and pass the turn back to Robert. I see some Ojutai's commands and a Gideon there.
And this is just too many turns of not casting things. at least for my taste.
All right, Robert is going to attack with a Spell Queller. Zachary's going to use a Blessed Alliance with Escalate, trying to gain 4 life and making Robert sacrifice an attacking creature. It's pretty important that it actually does not target, so it can't be stopped by Rattle Chains.
Yep. And, Robert saw this Blessed Alliance in the previous game. If you're worried about, if you see Blessed Alliance from your opponent, that's a good reason to have multiple creatures to be able to attack with.
All right, well, this Spell Queller is going to be sacrificed.
And Robert is going to be able to salvage a little bit out of this exchange by countering it with Ojutai's command when it comes back. But
here's the land that is going to grow the Sylvan Advocate, and boom! Dragon Lord Dramoka. It's going to come down for Zachary.
Yeah,
I was hoping we'd see this.
A very, very powerful dragon. And this is why, as the Spirits player, I would prefer to see a line that's a little bit more aggressive, tries to close the game out a little more quickly, because Robert really has nothing to do against this Dragon Lord Jamoka. He's got access to 3 Declaration of Stones in his deck. That's it. Maybe he has the 2 Spell Snares, from his sideboard, but, maybe he gets hit once by the Dragon Lord Jamoka, finds an answer for it, but Zachary has a bunch of stuff that Robert can't really deal with.
And Robert's just going to pass the turn without playing anything. Zachary's going to fire up Hissing Quagmire and attack for lethal. Because of Dragon Lord Jamoka, Robert's just not able to play any spells on his turn, and Zachary Canner is going to move on to 11-3 with Abzan control, while Robert Gross is going to move to 10-3-1. I believe Zachary will still be live for top 8, but I think that X3-1 might be a little too far out, but I do wish Robert good luck next round, and maybe he can sneak in at the bottom of the top 8.